So my friend growing up when I was 10 years old was Suzette LaRue. And Suzette and I lived in Pearl River, New York. Some of you may know that area. And we lived adjacently to each other on Washington Avenue and Roosevelt Street. And the next block over was the downtown area. So back in the day, at 10 years old, we were allowed to go exploring. So this is what the parking lot looked like. So Suzette had been given a prescription from her mom, and her mom said, I need you to pick this up for me. You can stay out for a little while, but then come back home and bring the prescription. So we go walking to our parking lot, and we're down here, and we get to the back of what used to be called Suntag Drug. So it was our local pharmacy. So as we start to, and we knew the back of these stores, you know, like the back of our hand. As I mentioned to you, we were always exploring back there. So I go to walk down, there's like a little dip there that you can see. This is the location. It's just not a picture from back then. And I remember climbing over, and my foot landed on something in the snowbank. And Suzette now is already ahead of me, and she's about to open the door. And I look down, and I see what looks like something leather. And I'm like, oh, is it a wallet? Maybe there's lots of money in there. Is it a pocketbook? Like, what is this? So I reach down and I pick it up, and it's a .38 caliber revolver in a leather pouch. So I pick it up and I'm like, oh, this is a real gun. And now Suzette's like, oh my gosh, and she's like, I gotta get my mom's prescription. I'm like, I have a gun in my hand, and you're worrying about your mom's prescription, right? So she's like, no, I gotta go in there. So now I'm like, wait, and then I'm looking around and we're like, who dropped this? And she goes, maybe it's the mob. And I'm like, the mob? And now we're looking around and I'm like, is the mob gonna come after us? Like, do people know now that I have this gun? So I'm in this ugly coat that looks something very similar to this coat that I found on the web. I'm telling you, it was close and it was ugly. So now I take this gun, which I found out later was loaded, by the way, and I stick it in my pocket. And now it's in my pocket, and I'm like this, right? So she goes into the pharmacy, and I'm like, I'm not waiting out here with the mob. Like, I'm gonna go into the pharmacy. So now I get into the pharmacy with her, and she's dealing with the person at the counter. Now, mind you, we're 10-year-old girls, and I'm thinking to myself, this man behind the counter knows I have a gun in my pocket. He didn't, but that's what I was thinking. So now she's doing the transaction with the man, and I'm standing there with my hand on the gun, shoved down in my pocket, thinking to myself, okay, breathe, don't let him know, you're like, don't act like nothing's going on, right? And how I'm doing this to my 10-year-old self, I still not quite sure. But so she finally finishes the transaction, and I'm like, we need to go to the police booth. We need to get to the police booth that is through town and up the road. And this is the actual police booth. I did a drive-by and took a selfie, and I was like, I hope they're not gonna get mad at me for shooting the police booth today. And it was a long road. So I'm like, we have to run there, and we have to get this to the police department. Now, my brother, I grew up, he had BB guns, he had other types of pellet guns and things, so at least I knew that it was a real gun and something that I shouldn't be playing with. Okay, so we get out the other side. Now, mind you, we walked in the back. So we go through the pharmacy, she does the transaction, I'm holding the gun as deep in my pocket as I can, and now we come out the other side. And now, I don't know if you've ever seen this movie, but has anybody seen A Christmas Story with Scott Farkus? All right, so I had Scott Fergus, and he was our Scott Farkus with his little crew, and they're on the other side of that door in the parking lot. And all I'm thinking is, oh my God, if they push me, they were bullies, and they would push you around. And I'm thinking, what if they get the gun from me? Boys are gonna play with the gun. I can't let them know that there's this gun in my pocket. So whatever we said, whatever we did, I said some fast talking. I said, we gotta go, oh, I know what it was. We had to get this prescription to her mom, who was getting her hair done down the street. Completely like made that up out of nowhere because she was in the other direction. So we get past the kids, and I'm thinking, okay, we got through that hurdle. And now we finally get to the police booth, and I'm not thinking, again, I'm a little nervous. I've been trying to keep my act together to get us down there, and there's a police officer now behind the door, sitting at the counter facing me. So I reach into my pocket and I pull it out in the pointing position. And he goes like this, and I'm like, no, 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 no. I just found this. I found this, and I'm trying to give it to you. And he's like, oh, okay, okay, okay. So now they interview us, and they call our parents, and then next thing we find ourselves in the paper as heroes. Girls find loaded gun on treasure hunt, and they even made a joke that perhaps next time we're going to be looking for a howitzer. At 10 years old, I'm like, what's a howitzer? My father's like, it's a really big German gun. That's all you need to know, right? So, but if you look at this, back in the day, they actually put Patty Murphy, that was my maiden name, lives at 39 Roosevelt Street. Suzette LaRue lives at 81 Washington. Could you imagine if they put children's names in the paper today for this? So, you know, we show up, and this is now hanging in the 5th grade classroom when we get back to school on Monday morning. Now, other than that, I was a pretty shy kid. I really was, and I'll tell you why in a minute, but I remember thinking, wow, you know, they think that we're heroes. How exciting is this? But then the next day, when we showed up in school, we didn't have social media back then, but this was our version of the haters on social media. They had drawn on our faces. So I was just like, oh, well, I guess that lasted about a day. So the reason that I have this here is because I wanted to tell you that this was an example that I didn't even realize at 10 years old, that I was going through the 3 processes of what I teach people today. I had to get my physiology together. I had to control my breathing. I had to calm myself down. Then I had to work on my psychology and really talk myself through, how am I going to interact with this pharmacy person that's behind the counter? Now how am I going to deal with the boys that are outside that cannot get this gun away from me? And now my communication, when I pulled out the gun in the pointing direction, you better believe I had to communicate fast, right? So back in retrospect, and not even knowing it at the time, I had done all 3 of those things that helped me do something that could have ended differently, that could have gone terribly wrong. But I was able to perform, and this has become my Calmfidence method that works for any high-pressured situation, any big moment that you have to step into. And keep in mind that big moments are big to us and may not be big to somebody else. So I work with a lot of clients that have a big moment that you would think, oh, that's no big deal, but to them it really is. Or other people that have to go on stages in front of the camera or big interviews, and that's obviously a big moment. But these 3 things will help ground you, will help calm you, will help get you into a place where you can trust yourself. And isn't that what we all really want? And not hopefully have people draw on faces on our picture. But the other problem is that when I was 10 years old, when I was in 5th grade, I had something else in my pocket that I didn't want people to know about. And as quickly and as fleeting as that courageous moment felt, I had imposter syndrome that I couldn't possibly be this hero or this courageous person because of this other thing I had been hiding in my pocket. And what that was that made me feel really, really bad about myself when I was a kid was that I was a bedwetter. I had this problem where I just couldn't, I would be sleeping and I would wet my bed. And back then they didn't have adult diapers and I couldn't fit in little child's diapers. So as you can imagine, I would often wake up soaking wet, my bed would be cold, I'd wake up shivering, and then I had to go into school. And this continued into middle school. So talking about thinking that you got something hidden in your pocket, like nobody knew this, but I would walk into school each day thinking, they're gonna know. They're gonna know what I just went through this morning before I came here. And of course they wouldn't. And we can tell that to ourselves as an older, mature person. But back then, I was like, wow. So that was probably my first interaction with feeling this sense of imposter syndrome, which can be really a stickler for many, many people, no matter what age they are. Obviously, I grew out of it at some point, but middle school can be tough for guys and girls. So you walk in with something of that in your pocket every day, it's even tougher. So as I went along and started coaching and training people through my coaching and training business, I encountered many people in different roles that were experiencing this sense of imposter syndrome, no matter how successful they were, no matter how expert they were at something. So I've changed the names to protect the innocent. These are not real pictures of real clients, but they represent these clients, so just so that you know. So I had this one client named Jane who was a big chef on one of the cooking networks. She had a bona fide broadcasting show where she would go on and she would teach people how to cook recipes. And when it came time for her to talk directly to the camera, she would get very nervous, especially when they were live, right? Her audition went well, they hired her because she was so good at what she did, but every time she'd get on air, she would get visibly nervous. So they sent her to me to work with her. And after several sessions, what we found out was that she was talking to her father when she would look into the camera. Now, normally, I will tell people when I coach and train them to be speaking directly to the camera, don't talk to an audience, don't talk to a faceless group of strangers or a group of people. Always make it be a one-on-one conversation with someone who's an ally, somebody that is, receptive to what it is that you're presenting, right? So when she told me that she was talking to her father, I was like, oh, that should be okay. But as we went along in the conversation, I found out that her father was totally against her becoming a chef and had wanted her to become a doctor. He did not approve of this, no matter how much success she had. So every time when she would look into the camera and she thought of her father, this imposter syndrome would happen, this nervous energy that she couldn't control, and it would become this downward spiral. So what did we do? I said, you're never talking to your father again when you're in front of that camera. You're going to talk to somebody who burns the crap out of something that desperately needs your help. And that flip of her mindset took a little while, but that would be the story in her mind when she would look into the camera. I'm now here to help someone who really needs my help and guidance, that I can be a teacher for, that I can make a difference in someone's life. So she had to let her father go, and that solved that. I had another client who worked for a large law firm, and she was with all attorneys. And she had never become an attorney because she wanted to be, but something happened where she had a family, things got in the way, and she just never did that. But she worked at this law firm, and everybody looked up to her. She was like the go-to person that they would, run things by, make sure that things were taken care of, etc. But she had this terrible sense of, I don't really belong here because I'm not this. We can all have that fill in the blank. I'm not this, I'm not good enough, I'm not an attorney like the rest of the people that I work with. But yet she'd be invited to these panel discussions, and she would decline them because when she'd get up there, she'd blank out, she'd have this panic moment, she would think she didn't have anything to offer, and it would be a disaster. And they reached out to me as a group to basically say, we need her to be able to go on these panels because she's really the person that we want to have representing us at some of these events. So one of the things that I did with her, and this, what I just told you was through discovery with us talking about how she felt about herself, but she had only seen herself fail. So we went through all these different exercises where I would have her close her eyes and I would narrate her through prepping for the event, getting up on the stage, seating herself, seeing interactions, seeing herself answering questions, seeing it go well, even getting off the stage and getting wonderful feedback from people. And one of the first sessions that we did this in, she started crying. And I was like, why are you crying? She goes, because I've never seen myself succeed before. I've only seen myself fail 1,000,000 times in my mind. That was powerful. We helped her get over that hump, and now she has walked into owning that she can be at these events. I had another client that was sent to me by a company that wanted this person to become a broadcast for sports. And this was someone who had worked on the field as a very well-known football player. And he immediately thought that he should be able to have the exact success in front of the camera for broadcast analysis as he did on the field. And during our first session, it was just him and I in the room, and I'm trying to put him through these motions and these exercises of speaking direct to camera. He starts crying. in the room. This is a big man that probably could lift all of us in this room. And it made me feel good that he felt that he could do this in front of me. And I was like, it's totally cool. No one will ever know that this happened. But I was like, what is happening here? And he's like, I'm putting so much pressure on myself that I feel like I should be able to do this right here and right now. And I'm like, why? And he's like, well, because they hired me and they expect that I can do this, and that's why they're giving me the job. And I was just like, you have to give yourself some time to step into this new role. So he was experiencing imposter syndrome because he had not given himself any time to grow. He had not cut himself any slack to learn a new skill. And that was an epiphany for him because he really thought that he was going to be expected to get it right away. And to give yourself that gift of process and development is sometimes something that we don't do. So let's say if you step into a new role, you may have earned your right to get there, but there's still going to be growth that has to happen once you're there. And so many people make that mistake of putting so much pressure on themselves to be instantly good at this new thing. And we just simply couldn't do it. You know, I mean, if we wanted to become a doctor, they're not putting a scalpel in your hand immediately and opening up someone's brain and saying, have at it. It's just not happening, and we tend to forget that, and we put all this pressure on ourselves. So here's something that is a little heavy, and I'll try to lighten it a little bit, but when I was doing the news, we had covered a story about this minivan that got stuck somehow between two big tractor trailers on the highway. And it got stuck, and then it started to catch on fire. And we interviewed the man who was the survivor, and there were other survivors, but he had been sitting in the passenger seat, and his wife was in the driver's seat. She was a very big, heavy-set woman, and she had her seatbelt on, and he had two kids in the back of the car. He only could get out of his side of the car. And then he couldn't get them out. He couldn't get her seatbelt on. He couldn't get back in. The car started burning. He goes running out of the car, and he's trying to get help, and he's trying to tell people. And then he realizes, I got to go back to my family. So somehow, and he doesn't even remember, he crashed through the front windshield, got his wife out, got the kids out, and saved all of them. Lost both of his legs and almost all of his digits doing so. And when we talked to him afterwards, off the record, I was aside with my producer, and he started talking to us, and we were talking about, him being a hero. And he's like, I'm not a hero. And we were like, what? Of course you're a hero. And he's like, no. And we're like, why? And he goes, I really went back to that car to die with my family because I didn't want them to die alone without me. And we were like, but you did it. And he goes, but that wasn't my intention, and I don't know how I did it. So this is a perfect example of he was hanging around with this old identity. He kept reliving the fact that he thought that he was a coward in his mind. He kept going back and defaulting to that, even though he clearly was a hero. And what happens many times is that we go back to these old identities. We go back to when we were less than. We go back to this default, bad, negative place, rather than giving ourselves credit for something that happened later on. And this happens sometimes with conditioning, things that people said to us, coaches, parents, people who judged, people who gave us labels. And we do this subconsciously without even realizing that we're going back sometimes to these old labels, even though we've become somebody else, or we've achieved something else. And this is obviously an extreme, heavy example of that. But clearly, he was a hero, but he couldn't see himself that way because of his original intention for what he thought he was going to be doing. That's carrying around luggage, and we all do it to some degree. So what we focus on expands. So he kept focusing on what his original goal was, or at least what he thought his original intention was, rather than focusing on what actually happened. So how often do we focus on old stuff that no longer serves us? And we all do it in some way, shape, or form. So one concept that I want to talk to you about is the idea of identity. And we all have different identities. It's not like we have multiple personality syndrome, but we all have different identities. I'm a mom, I'm a wife, I've been a news anchor, I'm an author now, I've been a teacher, I'm an adjunct professor, I'm a friend, I'm a sister. There's all these parts of us that we bring to the table at different times, right? But sometimes we choose the wrong identity, or we get defaulted into a less powerful identity at a time where we really need to pull one of our stronger identities forward. And that's why I really believe that imposter syndrome is a myth. I think that we're doing two things that isn't really imposter syndrome. We're either defaulting to the wrong identity that we're picking, or we haven't given ourselves time and cutting ourselves some grace, some slack to become something, whereas we might still be in the process of becoming, and we haven't given ourselves the permission to let that be okay, to let good enough be good enough. So I like to think of our identity almost like a wardrobe, right? Because don't you go to your closet in the morning and say, oh, am I going to be the soccer mom today? Am I going to be the news anchor? Am I going to be the executive? Am I going to go out dancing and wear the mini skirt with my husband tonight? These are all parts of us that we might not bring to another part, right? But we do this all the time with our wardrobe choices. And that's how it influences how we show up, our presence, our energy, our confidence. We do this wardrobe trick every day. So why not do it in our mind's eye? Why not, before we're coming to an event, say to ourselves, what's the strongest identity? What's that identity switch that I can do today that I can bring with me? So for instance, let's say that maybe I'm in a situation that I'm not familiar or comfortable with and I have to get to the front of a room. I'm not going to bring a less empowering identity with me. I'm going to say, you know what? I've been a college professor. I'm going to bring that identity with me today. I don't need to know everything, but I'm going to step into this and try to help people learn something in some way. I'm going to try to benefit them in some way. That's the identity that I'm going to try to choose today, because it makes a difference who we pick, and it's got to be intentional, because we do this stuff and don't even think about it. We show up, we're having a bad day, we don't feel good, we're feeling less powerful, and we're not realizing that we have the ability to go into the wardrobe of our mind and decide what identity is going to serve me best today, right? So rather than, am I good enough? How about, what's my role right now? And I love to talk about, remember Sully Sullenberger landing the plane out in the Hudson? I heard an interview with him afterward, and he talked about the idea of that he could focus on nothing else. He said, I need to default to my training identity. I have to only focus on what I know that should work for me to be able to land this plane safely in the Hudson and have no one die. And he said to himself that he kept, other thoughts were coming in, other worries, and he just kept pushing them away, pushing that identity out, pushing this worry out, and said, I have to just go to my training identity and stick with that for this to happen. And we all know what happened. That worked for him. So it's that self-talk and that repetition that sometimes we just have to make sure that what we're doing, that we're choosing that power identity. That's the powerful part of ourselves, and we all have it. We all have more powerful parts of our identity than we do lesser ones. So one perfect example, I was out doing a speech for Howard Hanna Coach Realty back at the end of January. And I had to do this identity switch because 4 days before, my mother passed away. And that's what was in my pocket when I got up on that stage. And I could either focus on that I was holding her hand just a few days prior to that, and that I'm in the daughter identity, or I could completely switch out of that and come into my identity as being an author and a coach and trainer, and be there and be other focused and make sure that I was there 100% present for the people that had come to watch me that day. I signed a contract months before that. I couldn't not show up. So I had to be able to control my body, my physiology, my psychology, and my communication skills, those three things in the Calmfidence Method that could help me segment and compartmentalize so that I could show up with the identity that I needed to. Did I go home after that and go back and sit on my couch and eat ice cream and cry? You betcha. But I didn't do it when I needed that right identity that was up there. When I was writing my book, I felt like an imposter. I felt when people would call me an author, I was like, author. I bought a hat. This is the actual hat that I would wear around the hat that said author on it, just to try to convince myself that I could become an author because I was growing and changing. So that's what I was talking about. When you're saying to yourself right now, maybe you're thinking, well, what if I don't have the identity that I need in this situation? Then you build an identity bridge. And the identity bridge is, what am I becoming? And how am I getting there? And how am I going to give myself grace in the process to show up the best that I can right now until I can fully take ownership and earn that new role or that new identity, right? So let's think about this. So name the future ID, right? So you could pick anything in your mind that you think that you would like to become or a role that you want to become. So I had to identify what's the gap. I kept saying, I'm not an author. But a better choice would be, what skills and beliefs are still developing that can help me get over there? And see, did you notice that I chose an image with the big focus, with the big spyglass? Because what we focus on, it expands. And that can get us over the bridge. Am I going to focus on what I'm not enough of, what I don't have? Or is it better if I focus on what skills are still developing? So something true and accessible that I can really use to move me forward. So what would that be? Instead of I'm not an author yet, I'm a disciplined writer who shows up daily. And if I do that, eventually I will finish the book and I will become an author. Big different mental switch there of getting myself beyond that point of feeling like I'm not really this thing yet, but I'm on my way. And that's a really important distinction. So you don't need to leap into a new identity. I'm not leaping over that if there's no bridge there. I don't know about you, right? But you build your credibility on the way as you build your identity bridge. And by the way, there is no growth in your comfort zone. There is only growth in your life, in my life, in nature, when you get out of your comfort zone. That's where the growth happens. So if we avoid situations where we're uncomfortable, or we get upset about, feeling like that, that's not my comfort zone, all right? And I'm not going to grow into that area. Don't want it, not going to happen. But whenever I get that feeling now of like that imposter syndrome or that weird thing, I'm like, oh, it means I'm growing again in some way. And that's why they're not called growing tickles. They're called growing pains. So we have to go through those pains and awkward, weird moments to grow into some other area of our life. And I really believe that our entire lives, we are here to continue to learn and grow. So we better get used to, in broadcasting they call it getting comfortable feeling uncomfortable. Because you are uncomfortable in numerous live and breaking news and unpredictable situations, right? So we talked about the big moments. So let's go a little bit further into what is BIG. And it's really aligned with whatever your big moment is. Getting your body under control, your inner world, and your game plan, which is also communication. So let's talk a little bit about how we do that. So studies show that when we are experiencing stress and anxiety, that our cognitive skills and our communication skills are operating in a 70% deficit. So when you blank out and you can't find the words or you can't control certain things, that's really a physiological thing that's happening. So it really is worth our while to try to find our calm going into any situation, because we will think clearer, we will make better decisions. So to be able to take that time and get ourselves set before we enter the situation. And many of us, I know, are juggling 8 different things, and we show up in the situation, we just get there on time, and we don't take that. It just takes 30 seconds at the water cooler or in the restroom to get a hold of your breathing and do a couple of things that we're going to talk about. So we're going to talk about body first. So belly breathing. Studies show that after the age of 6, we don't belly breathe any longer. We breathe from our chest, we breathe from a tighter place in our throat and in here. But to be able to fully breathe from that lower belly, where you almost can feel it expand like a balloon, really makes a difference in getting more oxygen to our brain so that we can think clearer. It helps regulate our breathing and our heart rate and all of these different things. So start to think about, like, when you're feeling stress or anxiety or when you're in a pinch, where is your breath coming from? I guarantee it's probably not coming from your stomach. So my friend Dr. Belissa Vranich, say that fast 3 times, wrote a book all about this kind of breathing, and I'm starting to take her certification program to really help people get get back to that belly breathing. So think about your diaphragm. It's just like a little flat pizza or cummerbund that's right here. You want to feel that fully expand and release when you're taking those nice deep breaths. Every day, whenever you can, but especially in moments when you're a little nervous. Okay, let me tell you how difficult it is to try to find a decent and nice picture of a tongue to share with you people. Took a while to search for this image. Now, what is important about the tongue is that when you relax your tongue, it has a cascading effect on your entire body. And how often do you think about your tongue? Probably not. But now when you think about your tongue, you're going to think about Patricia Stark. Because you're going to think to yourself, oh, my tongue is really like pushing up against my teeth. It's pushing up against my roof of my mouth. It is tense. We hold so much tension in our tongue. So what I want you all to do right now is just take a minute and just kind of like let it relax. You have like this little parking space in the bottom of your mouth there. Just feel your tongue kind of drop. Let it relax. Just let it sit in there without doing anything. And then you should feel your shoulders relax, and then it kind of cascades down your whole body. This is a brilliant thing that no one will ever see that you're doing and can really give you a lot of relaxation the more you practice it. So today, you know, it's a little quickie here, but start doing this when you need to before, and it actually helps your voice. It helps, again, calm your breathing. It does a lot of different things that it can solve if you start thinking about, let me relax my tongue going into a situation. All right, this is now called the lion's breath. And now I'm going to show this to you. It's going to get ugly. Okay, so this is something that you do when you really need to get rid of a lot of nervous energy and tension. All right, so you're going to let your tongue hang out. I'm just going to show it to you, okay? That was great. I'll have what she's having, right? I mean, seriously, now it's your turn. So what you're going to do, and you're going to do this, you're all going to do this with me. I want you to let your tongue hang out of your mouth. You're going to shake your head, and that yell, that release of that yell, is really something that you need to do. Now, you can't do this in front of certain people. You can't do this necessarily in public, but you can go somewhere. If you're like ready to pop and you need to get some relaxation and relief, I'm telling you, do the lion's breath and you'll be like, I'm good. Bring it at me. Okay, so are we ready? 1, you gotta do it together. I'm watching you. 1, 2, 3. I wish I had a video camera facing this direction right now. And aren't you lucky that I don't? Thank you for being good sports on that. So we're going to talk a little bit about body language because that falls under the category of our body. So just know that when we're feeling like we are stressed or under the gun or in the spotlight, we minimize our body. We minimize our space. We use up less space. When we're feeling confident, we stand up straight. Now, Amy Cuddy did this great TED Talk on how if you do this within 2 minutes, you can actually change your physiology. So this is what's happening when we're feeling in high power poses or low power poses. We can make this happen. So we can stand up straight and use our space and mimic this to help us feel more confident. So in just 2 minutes, you can go from your cortisol level, which is your stress hormone, dropping, plummeting, and your testosterone, which both men and women have, which is our confidence hormone, will rise when you use your body, when you stand up tall. So our moms had something right when they said stand up straight and tall. But when we implode, the opposite happens. Our testosterone drops and our cortisol stress hormone raises. So what position are we in when we're on our devices? Our phones, our laptops. So we could be in this implosion and not even knowing it before we walk into an important situation. So be conscious of your body language and what you're doing, and notice this in others. If you're interacting with people and they're minimizing, you need to find out why are they not comfortable in your space. What can you do to help them feel more safe and trust you and open up a little bit more? So this minimizing and this expanding can help you in both directions, okay? So our inner world is the next part of the big moment. So this is a screen, but you have a mental screen. We all do. And you are the director of that mental screen. Just like that woman that I told you about that only had seen herself fail in her mental screen until she changed her mental screen and saw herself succeeding. And just think of anything around you that's not man-made that's not nature, I should say, that's not of nature, that's man-made, had to first become it was first an idea in someone's mind. It was first an image in someone's mind. That to me is incredibly, just shows how powerful our visualization can be to manifest into the real world. And that also means how we construct our outward lives. Is what are we imagining, what are we picturing internally, and what have we been picturing internally all this time? And studies show that 80% of self-talk is negative. That's crazy. That's a lot for human beings. And that means that, wow, if that's my default, and that's a survival mechanism. You know, we're just hardwired to think worst case scenario, protect ourselves, etc. But 80% negative thoughts does not really serve us very well, does it, right? So we have 60,000 thoughts running through our mind every single day. And in the book, I write about the concept of, are you going to be your inner critic or are you going to be your inner coach? And if you're the director, who are you going to hand the mic to? So are you handing the mic to your inner critic or are you handing the mic to your inner coach? Because you can't do both at the same time. So if 60,000 thoughts are running through and 80% of them are negative, you really need to make sure who you're handing that mic to during your daily lives, and especially in a high-pressured situation, right? So that's, again, that identity switch. Who am I going to pick to have the visualization, to that self-talk? Because someone once said, the most important thing you will ever hear is what you say to yourself. Right now, I'm like saying to myself, what are they saying about me? I'm interpreting this. You know, we interpret others and our judgment of ourselves and what we think other people are thinking of us. So game plan and communication. So all outward communication starts from within. Our interpersonal skills, our communication skills, our relationship skills are all based on what is the conversation we're having with ourselves. What are we telling ourselves, about the situation? Everything, all outward communication starts from within. So you gotta do this work in here first before you're gonna rely on your outward interpersonal skills, communication skills, or relationship building skills. It's gotta be right in here before you do that. So again, feeling like an imposter does not mean you don't belong. It's a sign that you picked maybe a wrong identity or you haven't used that identity bridge. So energy is our first conversation. And what affects our energy? Because people are going to decide whether they want to be with us, whether they like us, or whether they trust us by our presence, by how we show up. What is our energy showing up? And we control that energy by those three things from the Calmfidence Method. How is our physiology? What is our psychology doing and how are we controlling it? And what is our game plan walking into that situation and how we've decided to communicate? Because all of those things are going to affect our energy when we show up in that room. I was driving down the West Side Highway today and I made the mistake of putting the news on. And I was like, no. I turned it off and I put on an audio book of some kind of professional or personal development because I was like, I need that kind of energy showing up in the room with you today. So we have to guard and control that energy to make sure that we are controlling that energy of how we show up with other people. So I will ask you today, what do you think sometimes you're walking in with in your pocket? Is there something that you may not even realize, or something that you're realizing right now when I'm talking to you? Because we all have something in our pocket that we don't want other people to find out about, or know about us, or that we think is less than, or not good enough. And how do we flip that and use that identity bridge to get us to another place, or to choose a better identity and leave that behind and not let that thing in our pocket, worry us or bother us? Everyone had a balloon on their chair, right? Okay, so I'm going to ask you all to take the balloon out. No party poopers here. Everybody has to take a balloon out. And this is going to be a little other gift for the day. What I want you to do is, you're going to each start to blow up this balloon, so let's get it to our lips. All right. What I want you to do is I want you to use your mental screen, and I want you to use those 60,000 thoughts that run through our mind, and with each blow into the balloon, I want you to blow in one thing that doesn't serve you well. One image, something you're worried about, something you don't like about yourself, something that somebody said to you that you want to get rid of. Fill the balloon with any images or any thoughts that are not serving you well right now. Let's do it. Visualize this. When I got my guided imagery certification, this is a real thing. I want you to see, no, don't let anything leak out. Really push it in. For those of you that have not the great breath, I apologize. I won't make you blow it all the way. Okay, now hold it so nothing leaks out. And now what I want you to do is I want you to visualize that you are getting rid of all of that, and now you're going to let the balloons go. Go. Woo! How good did that feel? Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time today. And what questions do you have for me? Is there anything that I hit on that you're thinking, I'm not quite sure how to get this identity, or what if I can't really wrap my mind around an identity that I have to have right now, or I'm still feeling like an imposter in some way? Questions?
My question is, a lot of what you're talking about is really taking control of your situation. But what if you're in a situation like this, for example, or another one where you're in a spontaneous situation where people may say something to you that's unkind, undermining. I've been in meetings where someone will disagree with me, or dress down. It happens.
Yes.
So how do you deal with that sort of on the fly?
Yeah, absolutely.
You're not able to do all this preparation.
Yeah. Well, I think we always want to respond versus react. So we have to pause for a moment and say, okay, I can't react emotionally here now. And I think that's where you can use those three things. You could say, let me pause for a second, let me get control of my breathing because I can feel this eating at me, I can feel this, let me just get control of my body for a minute, and now let me get to that psychology. And think to myself, just because I don't have to receive this. People can throw all kind of stuff at us, and that's fine, but that's on them. We don't have to accept it, but we then can switch to and say, how do I want to respond to this? And then, of course, you still get to control whether you're going to be upbeat and professional. And when I coach people for media training, I'll say to them, look, no reporter can take you down a negative road unless you let them. They cannot take you if you know how you want to segue to something, or you're just not going to go head to head with them. And you're going to bridge to something else, move on. But those are the really important moments where you're like, I got to get control of my emotions and my physiology, and then I have to decide how I want to respond here. And there's lots of examples of that. I mean, Sully Sullenberger had to really think, I wasn't expecting this. Man, talk about something coming at you from left field, and you could really, you had everyone's lives in your hand. I mean, that's a situation where people could actually die. And he had to control his mindset and his physiology, and then think about what's my game plan and how am I going to come, at this, without it escalating. Right? So I think that would be, the first choice. And then also kind of getting people's MO. Like when I was doing live news, I had this one producer that I learned quickly. She couldn't handle her own chaos. So if some live breaking news situation happened while I was on air and I was going to rely on her in my ear, I would be dead in the water. So I just start to learn, I knew her MO, and I knew that night that I had to have my laptop there, and if something was happening, like one night a plane went missing, and I just went on Twitter, and I was just trying to follow and do my own due diligence. I quickly learned about what type of plane this was, how many seats were in it. I did all of this work to save my own butt because I knew I wasn't getting anything from her because she was having trouble managing the control room. So I think it's knowing the suspects, but if it's in that moment, you can't control anything else but yourself. Right? Okay.
So I never thought about this until today, but I think I flew down to Palm Beach and did a presentation in front of 30 people. I was dehydrated and I was going to pass out.
Yeah.
They couldn't have been nicer, but I think it was also nerves.
Yeah.
And I think it was a combination. They gave me water and it was fine. I'm going to go again, but I just want to, what are some tools that I can use next time? I want to own it and say,
yes,
maybe give everybody a bottle of water. You know what I mean? Just make fun, make it a little lighter.
Yes.
But what are some things I could do when I'm in front of other people?
Yeah.
And high-powered people?
I love it because I had a very similar situation, and I'll tell you what I did, and I would recommend this, and it worked like a charm for me. So I do a lot of CME training, continuing medical education training for this one production company in New Jersey, and we fly all around the country. I do all of these live broadcasts for life science industry where I have to suddenly learn all of these really difficult pharmaceutical names and medical names, and it's like learning a new language every time. And I'm kind of the hired moderator, and I never want to look and sound like the hired help, so I put all my pressure on myself trying to sound like these doctors when I facilitate these things. And one day, a couple of years ago, and I'm just going to send it out there, I was going through menopause, and my brain wasn't working as good as it should. And I couldn't remember some of these names, and we're going live, and I could feel my throat tighten up, my breathing, I couldn't breathe, I couldn't catch my breath, and we're going live. I can't run out of there. I can't do anything. So through the first introduction, which is long, because I have a lot of housekeeping that I have to run down before I toss to one of the doctors, I literally almost passed out trying to get through that whole long sentence because I couldn't breathe, I couldn't control my physiology. Now I had a lot of things going on there hormonally, I had other psychological things, but I also in my mind got myself completely worked up. So what did I do when I knew, and I do this for them a lot, and they're one of my good clients, and I don't want to screw this up, and I think that's another reason I was putting all that pressure on myself, because they rely on me and they call me back a lot. Well, I had the luxury of one of my students that had taken some media training classes with me because she wanted to go on camera, was a hypnotherapist. So I'm like, Grace, you need to help me. Like, I keep reliving this, that this is going to happen the next time that I work with these clients again. No place else. Like a week later, I came in front of a stage of 3,000 people and I was fine. It was with them. It got locked in my head, just like, you're carrying around like luggage. You're talking about it today. You're carrying that around with you, right? So what she did with me over Zoom is she put me through a hypnosis session. She works with all these big athletes, by the way, where I saw myself in a safe place. She told me to pick a place. There's this grove in upstate New York that I used to go with my parents. And it's kind of a spiritual place, and it's a really wonderful place of memories with my parents. And she had me put myself in that place down to where I smelled the soil. I touched the bench that was there in my mind's eye. I saw the sun coming through the glistening leaves. And then I happen to be a person of faith, so I brought that element into it where the lights of the studio could be a light that I was connecting with. And she talked me through this about 15 minutes, and then she just disappears, and she goes, you're just going to sit here for a little bit, right? So a couple weeks later, I had one of these shoots down in Texas, and I go walk in, and I'm like, is this stuff going to work? I'm still thinking about this and everything. And then all of a sudden, I was like, no, just wait. Before you walk out there, new terminology, new client, new pharmaceutical words, made up, by the way. Pharmaceutical words are made up. And I went there, and all of a sudden, I saw myself in that place. My heart rate started to slow. I felt my shoulders drop. And then I came into the space. The light was there from all of the lights, and it was dark underneath, which reminded me of the dark soil of the dirt that I had smelled and touched. And I got through it. And now that went away. I haven't had that, and I work with them all the time. I'm going down to Texas with them again next month, and it hasn't happened again. So sometimes we need that little intervention of an expert but you can do this to yourself. I just described to you what she did with me. You could easily, Tony Robbins used to talk about how it's creating an anchor. So like if you're in a situation where things went really well and you kind of lock it in, you anchor it in, oh, this is going really well, like you people. You guys have been great today. So I'm going to look at you and I'm going to anchor it in right now, and I'm going to think about how wonderful you've been and what a great morning this has been. And now next time I get in front of a hostile audience, I'm going to walk on stage going, and it does create an anchor that does affect your psychology and your physiology. So I hope that helps.